Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 60 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today we're looking at Numbers chapter 6 through chapter 9, and it's quite a hefty amount of content. A lot of it we've already looked at either in other books of the Bible or we've covered some of this before, so not to repeat all of it. But what I did want to look at in particular was Numbers chapter 6. And I just wanted to highlight the Nazirite vow. Now, I do want to make a distinction because this sometimes can become a point of kind of confusion. Jesus, the Nazarene, is not the same as a Nazirite vow. I know the wording sounds similar, but it's very different. And we really have no indication that Jesus ever took the vow of a Nazirite. So a Nazarene was his location, of course, from Nazareth. So just to dispel that as we start out, the Nazirite vow, very interesting and really considered to be one of the strongest vows that could be made in the scriptures. And it was a time of separating oneself, separating yourself for dedication to the Lord. Now, we know that there are people who did this temporarily, and then those who were called into that lifestyle for their entire life, or vowed by their parents into that lifestyle for their entire life. An example would be, of course, we know Samson. He is called by God from birth, or really even right before his birth, that he would be a Nazirite, taking that vow for life. And it's really, almost in a sense, it's forced upon him because he's not really given that choice. He's raised from birth, or even really before birth, because his mother would have stopped taking anything as far as grapes and that line that would have defiled the baby within her womb. So Samson is going to violate this order or this vow a number of times, and we're going to get there. We're going to be in the book of Judges soon, so we'll see his life and how it unfolds and how he violates that. But this is the passage right here, Numbers chapter 6, that is worth any time that you hear of somebody taking the vow of a Nazirite or being raised in that vow. This is kind of where you want to come back to and look at this and consider what that vow's made up of. Another person who, and I would say this one is where we don't really have an indication that God's saying that this is how this child is to be raised, but he is raised that way, is Samuel. And sometimes that's easy to forget that Samuel, from childhood to death, as far as we know, was living out being a Nazirite, having taken that vow. It's also interesting, and this is a part that I can sometimes forget, because we don't have any biblical examples of this, but this wasn't just a vow for men, but also a vow for women. Now, it's interesting to note that for a woman, it would have been a bit extreme. Anyone taking that vow completely shaved their head at the beginning of that vow. So for a woman, it was almost a little bit of a shame at first, where for a man, having the long hair, at times, it depends on culture and just the time period we're in, but for a man, it was almost seen as shameful to have the long hair. For a woman, she would have shaved her head to begin that vow. Now, we also know that some would take this vow for a short time period. And this we see later Paul. Paul takes this Nazirite vow twice. So we see him doing that. One time it would appear that he's doing it on his own, and the other time he's doing it with a group of men, as suggested by the council in Jerusalem. And this was really to show that he was still dedicated to God. So it wasn't exclusive Old Testament or Old Covenant vow. and nothing was wrong with it. I'm not suggesting you run out and take a Nazarite vow today, but if you really felt that the Lord was leading you to have a period of dedication, it might be something to consider. I don't know. I'm not suggesting for somebody to do that, but what have you done to separate yourself, to give yourself to the Lord? Have you said, well, there's certain things I'm going to deny myself of because I want to have a stronger walk with the Lord? It's not saying that those things were sin in of themselves. Obviously, it wasn't a sin to eat grapes. It wasn't a sin to eat raisins. It wasn't a sin to touch a dead body, though it did make one temporarily unclean. And we also see here that it kind of lays out that if you accidentally, let's say, you were walking down the road and somebody walking next to you falls over dead and you touched them or they brushed up against you, well, you started the vow all over again. And some would say, well, that's, that doesn't seem fair. But here's the interesting thing. They didn't have to go through the normal period of cleansing or purification. They just started the vow over again. So it's kind of interesting that at least it leaves that out. Maybe that is implied in that they were needing to do that. And another who we also believe, just from the context of Scripture, was John, the baptizer, that he would have been raised as a Nazarite. Though it never specifically words that, it implies that by him not drinking grapes or taking the fruit of the vine. So we have that picture that he was also raised in that vow. The Scripture is going to continue in the gifts being given to the priest, and we see that every tribe of the Levites, with the exception the Cohen, they do not receive these carts because they're supposed to carry the elements or the furniture of the temple or tabernacle. They're supposed to carry them by hand, which we later learn the mistake of that when the ark is being taken to Jerusalem and they first put it on an ox cart and it starts to tip over and one of the priests reaches out to hold it or to balance it and he's instantly struck dead. That was not how God had prescribed for it to be transported. So for that reason, the Cohen did not need carts. So they're not given carts. But it does show that the others, whether it was transporting the material, the curtains of the tabernacle, the tabernacle covering itself, they were able to have carts for taking the poles of the tabernacle and the stakes and the ropes. They could put that on carts. So that was kind of nice to at least be able to transport those parts that way. But it was to show the people that the elements, the furniture of the tabernacle was set apart and was to be treated with great respect, and also to have those elements moving with the people. And then again we end off again with the Shekinah glory over the tabernacle, and again being that indication of God's presence with the people. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope your day is going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.